Hey guys, my name is Hannah Richardson, and I am going to be leading today's discussion on Chapter 6 in Coercion and Its Fallout by Sidman. The chapter is about escape, and as the title suggests, it revolves around the concept of escape, what it is, how it relates to punishment, how we act as coercers through our use of punishment, causing a desire for escape to those around us, though it may be unintentional. And one of the first subjects that Sidman discusses is the definition of contingency analysis, which is an incredibly important concept that most of us use regularly in our jobs, in our home life, in our social life, etc. So contingency analysis is basically the process of identifying behaviors and their consequences and then repeating the process until we have essentially found a solution, which to us, a solution is usually a positive change in the behavior, right? So one example that Sidman expands on in this chapter is the relationship between a teenager and their parent, which I personally loved because I felt like I could relate to that, and I'm sure some of you all can as well, whether it's from the perspective of the teenager years back or from the perspective of a parent. So Sidman explains that, so often when we see a teenager who sneaks out and remains hidden in their room, avoids contact with their parents, just avoids them, is embarrassed to be with them, basically interacts with them as little as possible, this interaction with the parent is a negative reinforcer to that child. So a negative reinforcer to that child in that they have no desire, they don't want to be there with them, right? That negative reinforcer causes them to want to escape. They want to escape being with their parent because their parent is that negative reinforcer, right? So this is possibly, it could be due to overprotective parents as the kid or teenager perceives them, nosy helicopter parents, right? Those are perceptions that the teenager is experiencing about their parents. Therefore, they do not want to be with them. So in this scenario of contingency analysis, basically what we can do is we can use contingency analysis on it, right? So if we analyze and we determine that our analysis is correct, then and the contingency is changed based on that analysis, then the behavior is going to change also, right? However, if the analysis we conclude is incorrect, then we can expect to see a lack of change in the behavior, right? So basically, if, say that I'm the example of the teenager, right? Say my parents are overprotective, they're nosy, we play the whole game of 20 questions every day I get home from school, right? And that drives me bonkers. And let's say that my parents change that contingency because at this point, they're a negative reinforcer to me, correct? At the same time, me choosing not to interact with them is punishing them, right? So in that, let's say they change, they've made an analysis and they change their behavior. I come home from school, we're not playing 20 questions. It's a simple, how was your day? Good, no, I answer. And then they say, great. That's it, right? And they allow me to kind of, lead the conversation as I desire, as I wish. Over time, the expectation with that contingency, assuming the analysis of it was correct, would be that my behavior will change. It would be that over time, they become less of a negative reinforcer, more of maybe a positive or neutral, whatever. Positive reinforcer, maybe not that, but neutral, right? To where I don't dread being with them, right? In that same scenario, right, then their punishment is no longer happening because they have stopped acting in a way that is punishing. Their behavior has changed. They have taken away the behavior. They have stopped the behavior that is punishing them, right? And in that same scenario, I no longer am viewing them as a negative reinforcer. I loved this example. I thought it was incredibly relatable, whether it be with parents, whether it be with grandparents, siblings. Siblings would be a great example, right? You know, you have a sibling who annoys the heck out of you, right? You maybe don't want to be with them anymore. So you have a little sibling, right? And they're just really annoying, always talking to you. They look up to you, but you just can't take it. They're a negative reinforcer, right? So you avoid them. You're like, I'm out. You escape, right? Negative reinforcers lead to escape. So you avoid them. You say no. They ask if they can hang out with you. You say no, absolutely not. Well, they're being punished, right? Their behavior is leading to a punishment. They're being told they're not allowed to hang out with you, right? So this can go, this concept of punishment and negative reinforcement is so applicable to many parts of our daily lives, whether that be with relationships in our family, whether that be with relationships at school, or the people we work with, whatever, right? So going on these same lines, I'm going to keep with this whole example, right? Sidman continues in this chapter comparing and contrasting negative reinforcement and punishment, which we've learned about punishment before. We've talked about that already, but negative reinforcement and punishment are not the same. They're not exactly the same, right? But they're not totally different either, okay? While the parent, remember, is acting as a negative reinforcer to that teenager, the teenager's response of avoidance to the parent is acting out as a punishment for the parent, right? Okay, so Sidman describes that negative reinforcers and punishments are basically the same events functioning in different ways. So as we can see, it's the same event, right? For the parent and the kid, but it's on two separate sides of, the totem pole, right? It's the same event happening, and they're similar, negative reinforcement and punishment, but they're still a bit different too, all right? So we've got negative reinforcement, and negative reinforcement is basically we stop behaving, we behave in a specific way, right? To remove the negative reinforcer. We actively do an action to remove it, and that action is oftentimes escape, because negative reinforcement, as Sidman explains, generates escape, whereas punishment, there we go, punishment is when we stop behaving in a specific way to keep from being punished, right? We don't want to experience that again. So we stop behaving in a specific way. Unfortunately, as Sidman describes in this chapter, punishment can sometimes have an adverse effect from what we are intending. We intend to punish a kid to get rid of a problem behavior, so to speak, and there's a lot of side effects with that. Maybe that behavior goes away, but at the same time, it kind of curbs. A lot of times with punishment, we have a lot of extra side effects where, sure, that behavior's gone away, but we've also curbed their maybe excitement, or we've curbed their enthusiasm or their creativity, right? So now they're no longer exhibiting that behavior, but they're also not doing what we wanted, right? So negative reinforcement, while paired together and oftentimes within the same event, are very different. One is negative reinforcement is leaving an action, right? And punishment is essentially avoiding, okay? So I loved his examples as we kept going. He talked about the laboratory rat as an example, which is a great and classic example. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that one, but essentially he goes on to say, we negatively reinforce the rat, right? And the animal is going to learn something, right? No matter what we do, like whether it's negative reinforcement or positive reinforcement, we can conclude that the rat and or our students, you fill in the blank, they're going to learn. But the difference is the side effects, as I just discussed. The rat when negatively reinforced, didn't move away from the lever that often, because every time he did, he got shocked. And so now he's just pressing the lever constantly. He's just over here pressing it, ready, like immediately to cut off the shock. He doesn't want to experience it. He's just gonna over there, right? He doesn't want that punishment. Whereas positive reinforcement, right? The rat maybe roams around, explores, the creativity, the exploration, the desire to explore and grow, and is still there, right? To experience other reinforcers, as Sidman described, is still there, so they're exploring within the cage. Now, they're being positively reinforced as well, right? But the animal, so a simple positive reinforcement contingency, the animal produces the food by pressing the lever, and also teaches there to basically, yeah, so Sidman is just explaining how they both are teaching methods, but which one is better? You know, which one produces longer lasting behavior change? Is essentially is a big question in this, right? So throughout this, we see that escape is a pretty common occurrence. This chapter made me really think about, you know, how I as a special educator utilize punishment and negative reinforcers at school. And at my school, I would say that given that most people aren't behavior analysts and they haven't really studied this stuff, and I'm obviously in the process of doing so, I would say negative reinforcement and punishment are pretty common even at my school. You know, kid does something wrong, we negatively reinforce them or we punish them, right? And there's a strong emphasis in my county on positive reinforcement, you know, PBIS, and using that as well. So that leads me to my discussion question for today, which is, Sidman describes, asks the question, is it more effective? Is negative reinforcement essentially more effective, or is positive reinforcement? Because as we saw with the rat can learn both ways. So my question for you all is, do you think negative reinforcement or positive reinforcement or a mixture of the two are more effective based on your experiences, based on the text we've read, what we've learned in our program, and why? So I'll say that one more time. Do you think that positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, or a combination of the two are more effective in behavior change, and why? Thanks for listening, guys. All right, have a wonderful day.